Hey guy, welcome back to Sleep Among Titans, where we drift through strange and quiet corners of the past, perfect for listening before you sleep. Tonight we're exploring a topic that sounds, well, a little less than sleepy. The history of getting high. But this isn't a story of parties or careless fun. This is a story about a time before pharmacies and prescriptions, a time when the line between medicine, magic and madness was dangerously thin. Imagine a world where the only relief from a broken bone was a drink made from poppy seeds carefully prepared by a monk in a silent moonlit garden. Imagine a night haunted by the horrors of battle, whose only peace could be found at the bottom of a cup of mead, laced with something a little stronger. Tonight we'll meet these people. We'll visit that monk's secret garden, we'll see what the village-wise woman brewed in her cauldron, and we'll even peek into the smoky lab of an alchemist chasing visions in toxic fumes. This is the story of how medieval people coped, how they dreamed, and how they tried to touch the divine, all with the help of the potent and often perilous plants growing just outside their door. What part of this hidden world are you most curious about? Let me know in the comments below. For now, just relax and let's step into the alchemist's garden. To really understand this world, you have to forget our own. Forget sterile labs and white-coated scientists. After the Roman Empire crumbled, it was as if Europe's medical hard drive had been wiped. Knowledge was scattered, fragmented, and the most reliable backup copies were saved, ironically, in the quietest places on earth, monasteries. For centuries, these isolated communities of monks became the unlikely guardians of healing. They were the doctors, the pharmacists, and the librarians of the old world all rolled into one, and their pharmacy was a garden, a patch of earth where every leaf, every root, every flower held a potential cure, a poison, or a pathway to God. Their guiding principle was something called the doctrine of signatures, a belief that was equal parts beautiful, poetic, and to our modern minds completely bonkers. The logic was that God had left clues in nature marking plants with a sign to show what they were for. A plant with a flower shaped like an eye must be for eye infections. A root shaped like a human body, like the famous mandrake well, that was powerful stuff, good for the whole system. A walnut which looks uncannily like a little brain, you guessed it, good for headaches and melancholy. It was a system built on faith and observation. But that's where things get complicated, because when your medicine can also induce powerful visions or a sleep so deep it borders on death, who decides if you're a healer performing a miracle or a sorcerer trafficking with shadows? That line was written in smoke. Let's begin in what was perhaps the safest place to hold such knowledge. Behind the high stone walls with a man who walked that fine line every single day. Let's begin in what was perhaps the safest place to hold such knowledge. Behind the high stone walls of a monastery with a man who walked that fine line every single day. His name is Brother Anselm, and if you were to picture him, you shouldn't imagine a figure of awesome power cloaked in mystery. Picture instead a man folded by time, his back perpetually bent, not in prayer, but from decades spent leaning over garden beds and sick beds. He is old, his face a kind and gentle map of wrinkles, his eyes a pale, watery blue that have seen more suffering and more relief than any soldier. His hands are his testament. They are gnarled, the knuckles swollen, the fingernails permanently rimmed with the good dark earth of his garden. But they are steady. In a world of chaos and uncertainty, Brother Anselm's hands are a promise of calm, deliberate care. His domain is the infirmary. It's a long, narrow hall of cold stone, but he has made it a haven of sorts. From the high wooden rafters hang bunches of drying herbs filling the air with a complex layered scent, the sharp, clean smell of lavender, the deep, calming note of chamomile, and the slightly bitter tang of yarrow. In one corner, a small fire crackles its warmth, fighting a losing battle against the chill that perpetually seeps from the stone floor. The only other light comes from a single tallow candle on Anselm's work table, its small flame dancing and throwing long soft shadows against the wall. For 2 nights this quiet sanctuary has been broken. The source is a man named Thomas, a stonemason, a man whose pride was in the strength of his arms and the certainty of his craft. He had been near the top of the bell tower setting a stone in place when a sudden gust of wind, a moment of imbalance, had sent him tumbling down onto the scaffolding below. Now he lies on a straw pallet, his leg brutally broken, bound in splints of oaken linen. But the splints only hold the bone. They cannot hold the pain. The pain is a living thing in the room. It is a high, jagged noise that pierces the sacred quiet. It's a relentless blacksmith hammering away inside Thomas's bones, each strike a fresh wave of agony that makes him cry out. Brother Anselm has tried everything in his gentler arsenal. He has brewed tea from the bark of the willow tree, a taste of bitterness that offers only a whisper of relief. He has made poultices of comfrey, the knit-bone plant, to lay on the swollen flesh, but it does nothing to silence the blacksmith's hammer. Anselm knows there is one last thing he can do, a final door he can open. It is a decision he never takes lightly. He walks to a heavy oak chest that sits in the corner, the only locked thing in the room. The iron key is heavy in his hand. He opens the chest and the scent of dried plants, a condensed and potent version of the smell in the room, wafts out. Inside are dozens of small labelled clay jars. He bypasses the chamomile, the valerian root, the lemon balm. His fingers, sure and steady, find a small dark jar at the very back. The label, written in his own neat script, says Lacrima papaveris, the tears of the poppy. He brings the jar to his table. Inside is a lump of dark, sticky resin harvested from the sleepy nodding heads of the opium poppies in his garden after their petals have fallen. It is the monastery's greatest treasure and its most guarded secret. He places the resin into a heavy marble mortar, a bowl worn smooth and shiny from generations of use by the infirmarians before him. He takes the pestle and begins to grind. The sound fills the room, a counter-rhythm to Thomas's pained breaths. It's a soft, rhythmic crushing sound. Shh, 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 the stone seems to say, as if calming the frantic energy of the poppy itself. He works with a focus that is both a science and a prayer, his mind empty of everything but the task. He grinds until the resin becomes a fine dark powder. The air now carries a new scent, faint and earthy with a bitter edge. He takes a small clay pot of watered wine warmed over the fire and pours it into the mortar. The dark powder swirls and dissolves, turning the wine into a murky deep red. Then from another jar he takes a spoonful of the abbey's own honey and lets it fall into the mixture in a slow golden thread. A drop of sweetness to mask the bitterness of the medicine, a small act of kindness. He holds the cup now, and he prays. It's not a formal prayer from a book. It's a silent conversation he has had many times. He gives thanks for the gift of the poppy, for the relief it can bring. But he also asks for guidance that its power to give sleep does not stray into its power to give a sleep from which there is no waking. He acknowledges the thin line he's about to walk and asks for a steady hand. He kneels by Thomas's side. The mason's eyes are wild with pain. Anselm murmurs to him, his voice a low, calming hum. He lifts the cup to the man's lips. Thomas drinks. The taste is strange, earthy and bitter, but with the faint sweetness of the honey. For a long moment nothing happens. The blacksmith in his leg continues to hammer. Then the change begins. It starts in Thomas's stomach, a gentle warmth that spreads outwards. The warmth flows into his arms and legs. The blacksmith, who had been hammering with such a frantic rhythm, seems to grow tired. The strikes become slower, softer, further apart, until finally the hammer is laid down. The jagged noise that had filled Thomas's mind is wrapped in thick, soft wool. The tension in his jaw slackens. The tight white grip of his knuckles on the straw bedding loosens his fingers, uncurling like a sleeping child's. His body, which had been a taut wire of agony, now feels impossibly heavy. He feels anchored, sinking gently into the straw, into the earth itself. His breathing, once a series of ragged gasps, deepens into a slow, even tide. And for the first time in 2 days, Thomas is at peace. He is asleep. Anselm stays there, kneeling, watching the steady rise and fall of the mason's chest. The candle on his table burns low. The infirmary is finally deeply silent. Here under God's roof, guided by centuries of careful knowledge, the poppy was a servant, a tool of mercy. But in a smoky cottage on the edge of the woods where knowledge was passed down in whispers rather than in books, its wild cousin served a very different kind of master. But in a smoky cottage on the edge of the woods where knowledge was passed down in whispers rather than in books, its wild cousin served a very different kind of master. This is the home of Elara, and it could not be less like Brother Anselm's infirmary. There are no clean stone walls here, only wattle and daub, a mixture of mud straw and hazel branches stained dark by the smoke that hangs perpetually in the air. The floor is packed earth, cool and damp underfoot. The single room is small, cluttered and alive with the smells of a life lived close to the ground. Wood smoke, the sharp tang of a goat that sometimes shelters in the corner, the rich scent of drying mushrooms and the ever-present complex perfume of dozens of bunches of herbs hanging from the low rafters. This is not a library of knowledge. It is a living pantry of it. Elara herself is a part of this landscape. She's a woman whose age is impossible to tell. She might be 40, she might be 60. The sun and the wind have carved fine lines around her eyes, but those eyes are sharp and clear. She's most likely a widow, as a woman living alone with such skills often was. She holds a precarious position in the village. When a child has a fever the priest's prayers can't break, or a cow gives sour milk, or a wound refuses to heal, the villagers come to Elara. But they often come at dusk when the shadows are long, knocking softly on her door, hoping not to be seen. They respect her knowledge, but they also fear it. She is the keeper of the old ways, the secrets that existed long before the church bell ever rang out across these valleys. Tonight a knock comes. It's frantic, desperate. A young woman named Isla stands on her doorstep, clutching a small bundle to her chest. Isla's face is pale, her hair is a mess, and there are dark, exhausted circles under her eyes. From the bundle comes a sound that every parent in history knows, and dreads, the relentless, high-pitched, inconsolable wail of a newborn who will not sleep. It's not a cry of hunger or simple discomfort. It is a razor-edged shriek of pure, unadulterated distress that has been going on. Isla sobs for 3 days and 3 nights. Elara takes the child, her movements practiced and calm. She ignores the noise, focusing on the tiny, rigid body. The baby's stomach is hard as a drum. Its tiny fists are clenched tight. Its face is a red, contorted mask. Elara knows this enemy. It has no name in her language, no diagnosis she could write down. It is simply the griping, a torment that can drive a new mother to madness. She hands the sleeping, now soothed baby back to Isla and turns to a dark corner of the cottage. Here, in a dusty basket, are her most potent and dangerous allies. She reaches past the familiar, friendly faces of chamomile and mint. Her fingers find a dried plant with hairy grey-green leaves and brittle bell-shaped flowers of a lurid, sickly yellow veined with a deep, unsettling purple. The plant has an unpleasant, heavy smell. This is henbane. Its other name is stinking nightshade, a name that tells you much of what you need to know. This is not Brother Anselm's carefully cultivated poppy. This is a wild thing, a trickster. In the right dose, it could soothe and bring sleep. In the wrong dose, it could bring on delirium, nightmarish visions, and even stop the heart. It was a plant that walked the edge of a razor. Elara's process is nothing like the monk's. Her tools are a hollowed-out stone for a mortar and a smooth river rock for a pestle. She takes a pinch of the dried henbane leaf, an amount so small it would be lost in the palm of your hand, no more than the size of a child's fingernail. This she crushes. Then she adds a heaping handful of dried chamomile flowers, the gentle, sunny-smelling herb of sweet dreams. She is burying the wild beast of henbane in a soft bed of its most gentle cousin. She's balancing the dark with the light. She crushes them together, then scoops the fragrant, dusty powder into a small wooden bowl containing a spoonful of rendered sheep's fat. She places the bowl near the hearth, letting the warmth of the fire melt the fat until it becomes a soft, fragrant, greenish-gold oil. There is no Latin prayer, no written ritual. Her magic is a low hum, a soft murmur of reassurance to the frantic mother, a wordless plea to the spirit of the plant to be kind, to be gentle. She dips a finger in the warm salve and, to calm the terrified young mother, rubs a little on her own wrist first. Then she hands the bowl to Isla. Slowly she whispers, round and round, like the sun. Hesitantly, Isla dips her own finger in. She rubs the warm, greasy herb-scented oil onto the baby's hard, distended belly. The heat is the first comfort. The scent of chamomile is the second, and the hidden power of the henbane is the third. She moves her hand in slow, gentle circles, and a miracle happens. The baby's frantic wails begin to taper off. The shrieks soften into whimpers. The whimpers fade into soft, questioning sighs. The tiny clenched fists relax, the fingers uncurling. The rigid little body, once a taut bowstring of misery, goes soft and pliable. The baby's eyelids, which had been squeezed shut, flutter open for a moment, then close again, this time in the deep, profound peace of sleep. The silence that descends on the small cottage is absolute. It is so deep it feels like a physical presence. Ela is crying now, but these are silent tears of pure, unadulterated relief. Elara accepts her payment, a small loaf of dark bread and 2 eggs, and gives Isla a final stern warning. Only a little, she says, her eyes sharp. Only when the need is great. And tell no one but your husband. She watches from her doorway as the young mother hurries back toward the village, clutching her sleeping child like the most precious treasure on earth. Ilara performed an act of healing. But as the shadows deepen around her cottage, a chill settles in her heart that has nothing to do with the night air. She knows how easily that story could change. A grateful mother today could be a terrified accuser tomorrow. Her power wasn't protected by stone walls or the authority of the church. It was protected only by success, a currency as fragile and fleeting as morning mist. This was a quiet kind of power born of necessity. But power in the medieval world also had a much louder, much more brutal face. For men like the knights, a Caelan relief wasn't sought in a garden or a cottage. It was sought in the bottom of a horn of mead, a desperate attempt to drown the ghosts of battle in a flood of blissful noise. This was a quiet kind of power born of necessity. But power in the medieval world also had a much louder, much more brutal face. For men like the knights, a Caelan relief wasn't sought in a garden or a cottage. It was sought in the bottom of a horn of mead, a desperate attempt to drown the ghosts of battle in a flood of blissful noise. We are in the great hall of a minor lord, a place of performative celebration. The campaign is over, the enemy vanquished, and the knights have returned. The air is thick with the smell of roasting pig, greasy from the spit mingled with the scent of spilled ale and damp wool. A fire large enough to roast an ox roars in the hearth, throwing flickering dancing light on the tapestries of faded hunts that line the stone walls. A bard with more enthusiasm than talent is strumming a lute in the corner, singing a song of heroic deeds that sounds nothing like the grim reality Caelan has just endured. The laughter is too loud, the jokes are too crude. It is a symphony of forced joy, and in the middle of it all sits Sir Caelan. He's a large man built for the brutalities of his profession. A fresh scar, still pink and puckered, cuts a path through his left eyebrow. He's doing all the things a victorious knight is supposed to do. He tears meat from the bone with his teeth. He bangs his drinking horn on the heavy oak table in appreciation of a bawdy joke. He even manages a smile that looks from a distance almost genuine. But if you were to look closely, perhaps from the perspective of the young squire, who nervously refills his horn, you would see it in his eyes. While the hall is a chaotic swirl of motion and noise, Caelan's eyes are unnervingly still. He is a man watching a play in which he is the lead actor with no memory of his lines. He is haunted. The ghosts of the battlefield have followed him home and they are sitting with him at the feast. The deep red of the wine being poured into a nearby cup is for a split second the colour of a friend's tunic soaking through. The sudden clang of a dropped metal plate against the stone floor is the shriek of sword against shield. Even the smell of the roasting pig carries a phantom undertone of something else, something burnt and terrible that makes his stomach clench. These are ghosts that cannot be reasoned with or prayed away. They are memories branded onto his soul, and they are immune to the cheerful noise of the hall. So Caelan turns to his own medicine. It's not a carefully measured draught from a monk, nor a gentle salve from a wise woman. His medicine is mead, a potent wine made from fermented honey, served in a polished horn from a wild ox. This is the Lord's special brew, much stronger than the weak ale given to the common soldiers. It's thick, cloyingly sweet, and carries a fire that burns all the way down. What Caelan doesn't know, or perhaps doesn't care to know, is that the Lord's brewer, an old woman with knowledge much like Ilara's, adds a generous portion of dried valerian root to the brew. It's an herb of deep and heavy sleep meant to keep the Lord's notoriously short-tempered knights calm and sedated. It amplifies the honeyed oblivion. Caelan raises the horn. He doesn't sip. He drinks deeply, letting the liquid drown the rising ghosts. The first horn quiets the sharpest edges of the memories. The second begins to soften the sounds of the hall, the bard's frantic strumming blurring into a dull hum. By the third horn, a welcome fog is rolling in. The faces of the men around him become indistinct, their loud laughter losing its meaning, becoming just another texture in the room, like the rough wood of the table or the heat of the fire. This is the state he seeks. It is not the gentle floating peace that Thomas the Mason found in the infirmary. It is not the soft warm release of the crying child. It is a bludgeoning, a deliberate act of self-erasure. He feels a leaden weight settle in his limbs, pinning him to the bench. His thoughts, which had been racing like panicked horses, are now forced to wade through thick, sticky mud. They slow, they stumble, they eventually stop. The ghosts, finding no purchase in the thick fog of his mind, recede into the shadows. He might be laughing now, a genuine booming laugh that shakes his broad shoulders, but it is the mead that is laughing. So Kalen is no longer home. He has successfully traded the sharp, piercing pain of memory for the dull, heavy blanket of numbness. He has purchased a few hours of not feeling a temporary truce in a war that will begin again with vicious interest in the cold, harsh light of morning. For Sir Kalen, the goal was to silence the mind to make the world blurry and indistinct, a desperate flight from memory. But across the continent, in the bustling, smoky cities, there were other men who sought not to blur the world but to sharpen it. They stared into flames and bubbling concoctions, not for oblivion but for revelation. They were the alchemists, and their high was a dangerous pursuit of knowledge, a quest to decode the very mind of God. For Sir Kalen, the goal was to silence the mind to make the world blurry and indistinct, a desperate flight from memory. But across the continent, in the bustling, smoky cities, there were other men who sought not to blur the world but to sharpen it. They stared into flames and bubbling concoctions, not for oblivion but for revelation. They were the alchemists, and their high was a dangerous pursuit of knowledge, a quest to decode the very mind of God. Let us leave the world of the body and enter the world of the mind. Our new setting is not a monastery, a cottage, or a castle, but a cramped, dusty workshop tucked away in the attic of a tall house in a crowded city. This is the laboratory of Master Valerius. The air here is thick with smells that have no business being in nature. The sharp, acrid bite of sulphur, the sour tang of distilled vinegar, and the faint metallic scent of heated minerals. The room is a cluttered forest of strange glass. There are alembics for distillation, their long curved necks like graceful birds. There are pelicans' vessels that feed back into themselves, and retorts with their swan-like necks bent over to kiss other flasks. And at the centre of it all is the athanor, the alchemical furnace designed to provide a constant gentle heat for days or even weeks at a time. To Valerius, this is not a stove. It is the philosophical egg, the womb in which matter itself can be gestated and reborn. Valerius is a man of the city. He's lean and pale from spending his days indoors with long, delicate fingers, stained not with dirt but with ink and chemical powders. He is driven by an ambition that would seem utterly insane to the monk, the wise woman, or the knight. He's not trying to soothe pain or escape memory. He's trying to conquer reality. He's engaged in the magnum opus, the great work, the quest to find the philosopher's stone, a substance that could turn base metals like lead into pure, incorruptible gold and grant eternal life. His worldview is a beautiful, intricate system of sympathies and correspondences. He believes all matter is a combination of three essential principles: Mercury, the fluid, volatile feminine spirit; sulphur, the fiery, combustible masculine soul; and salt, the stable physical body. He believes that lead is simply sick gold, a substance where these principles are out of balance. By purifying them, by washing and burning and recombining them in the correct way, he thinks he can heal the metal, and in doing so learn how to heal and perfect humanity itself. Tonight he is taking what he believes is a crucial step. He is working with cinnabar, a beautiful heavy stone the colour of dragon's blood. To him, cinnabar is a miracle of nature, a stone where the principles of fiery sulphur and volatile mercury are already married in a near-perfect union. His goal is to gently break that marriage to release the pure silvery spirit of mercury from its red, earthy prison. His movements are precise, a liturgy of science and magic. He carefully weighs a measure of crushed cinnabar, its powder, a startling brilliant red on the bronze scale. He places it into a glass retort, whispering a short prayer to the celestial intelligences that govern the mineral world. He places the retort into the soft, even heat of the athanor, and then he waits. He does not pace. He sits, his eyes fixed on the glass, his focus absolute. Hours pass. The only sounds are the soft crackle of the charcoal in the furnace and the distant chime of a church bell marking the deep hours of the night. Then he sees it. A change. A faint silvery mist is beginning to form on the cool glass of the retort's neck. As the heat continues, tiny shimmering beads of liquid metal like newborn stars appear. This is it. The spirit of mercury freed from its body. He leans closer. The seal on his apparatus is not perfect, none of them are. A faint, almost invisible vapour escapes into the air. He breathes it in deeply, not as an accident, but as an act of communion. He wants to absorb this pure essence into himself to align his own spirit with the spirit of the work. The effect is not sudden like the knight's mead. It is subtle, insidious, and for Valerius, utterly divine. First, a strange metallic taste on his tongue. He smiles. It is the kiss of Mercury, a sign that the spirit has recognized him. Then a fine tremor begins in his hands. He holds them up in the candlelight, marveling. He's not sick. He's vibrating in harmony with the cosmos. The air in the room begins to shimmer the single flame of the candle, fracturing into 1,000 tiny rainbows. He's seeing the world as it truly is, its hidden colors revealed. He hears a sound, a faint high-pitched hum that seems to come from inside his own head. It is the musica universalis, the music of the spheres, the divine harmony that holds the universe together. Intricate patterns like the knotwork from a sacred book begin to spin slowly in the dusty air before him. He's not hallucinating. He's seeing the underlying geometry of God's creation. A feeling of profound understanding washes over him. The secrets of transmutation of life and death, they are all here laid bare before him. With a trembling hand, he seizes his quill and begins to write frantically in his journal, trying to capture the flood of revelation. He scrawls down symbols and diagrams that would be meaningless to anyone else, but to him they are a direct transcript from the mind of God. He feels no pain, no fear. He feels only the ecstatic certainty that he is on the verge of a breakthrough that will change the world. He is a genius, a prophet, a chosen vessel for divine knowledge. He is in reality a man slowly, methodically poisoning his own brain. His quest to perfect metal is fatally corrupting his own fragile flesh. Valerius in his dusty workshop sought his visions alone, a willing participant in his own grand delusion. He chose his poison, believing it was a key. But what happens when the poison chooses you? When it comes not from a rare stone in a furnace, but in the very bread you eat? Out in the windswept fields of the countryside, whole villages were about to share a single terrifying nightmare, a communal high that no one asked for. Valerius in his dusty workshop sought his visions alone, a willing participant in his own grand delusion. He chose his poison, believing it was a key. But what happens when the poison chooses you, when it comes not from a rare stone in a furnace, but in the very bread you eat? Out in the windswept fields of the countryside, whole villages were about to share a single terrifying nightmare, a communal high that no one asked for. Our story now widens, leaving single individuals behind and settling over the small, damp village of Oakhaven. It is a village like 1,000 others, a cluster of humble, thatched cottages, a muddy track for a main street and a simple stone church, all huddled together as if for warmth against the vast empty fields that surround it. The lifeblood of Oakhaven is rye. It is the grain that grows best in the poor damp soil. It is the grain they harvest, the grain they mill, and the grain they bake into the dark, heavy loaves that sit on every table. Their lives are tied to its rhythm. This year the rhythm was off. The summer was cool and the autumn came with a relentless, chilling rain. The rye harvest was a desperate affair brought in damp from the fields. No one noticed the strange purplish-black growths like tiny horns clinging to the heads of some of the grain. This was a god of fungus born of the damp. When the harvest was milled at the village watermill, the dark horns were ground right along with the healthy grain, turning the flour a faint, unappetizing grey. The women kneading the dough would have seen it, perhaps even smelled the faint musty odour. But in a world where a failed harvest means starvation, you do not throw away bread. You thank God for what you have, and you eat. And so the poison entered them all, not with the focused intent of the monk or the alchemist, but through the most mundane, most sacred of acts, the breaking of bread. The first sign was not in the mind, but in the body, a creeping, tingling numbness in the fingers and toes. Within a day, this tingling became a fire, an agonizing, burning sensation that felt, as one survivor would later claim, as if my limbs were being roasted in a furnace while yet I lived. This was the holy fire, or St. Anthony's fire. People would lie moaning in their cots, their hands and feet feeling as if they were ablaze while being cold and clammy to the touch. This physical torment was the terrifying gateway. Then as the poison seeped deeper into their minds, the shared nightmare began. Let's see it through the eyes of a young girl, Anya. She is spared the worst of the fire, but not the visions. It starts when she sees the familiar wood grain on the door of her family's cottage begin to move. The knots in the wood become swirling eyes, the lines of the grain writhing like slow, sleepy snakes. She looks to her mother for reassurance, but her mother is on the floor screaming that her hands are swarming with black spiders. When Anya runs outside, the world has become a terrible fairy tale. The sky is a colour she has never seen, a lurid, sickly green. The village blacksmith, a stern and silent man, is dancing a wild, jerking jig in the centre of the muddy street, shouting arguments at the clouds. Down by the creek, a group of women are holding each other and pointing at the water, wailing about a winged beast with the face of a goat that is rising from the stream bed. The village priest, his face pale with terror, runs from cottage to cottage, waving his crucifix, his prayers drowned out by the screams of his flock and the erratic, frantic tolling of the church bell rung by another afflicted soul trying to drive the demons away. The most terrifying part is the consensus. One person's delusion becomes a shared reality. When a man points to the thatched roof of the church and screams that he sees a dragon with scales of fire, others look and they see it too. When a woman falls to her knees claiming to see the Virgin Mary floating in a radiant light above the bell tower, a dozen others fall with her, their faces turned to the sky, their eyes wide with a mixture of terror and ecstatic awe. Are they all mad? Or are they all somehow seeing the truth? Is this a punishment from hell or a test from heaven? There is no logic, no escape. The visions come day and night. Sleep offers no relief, only a descent into even stranger dreams that linger upon waking. The village of Oakhaven is no longer on earth. It has become unmoored, adrift in a collective fever dream, its inhabitants all passengers on the same terrifying sacred voyage. The dancing plagues, as it would later be called in other places, would eventually subside. The fungus would be consumed, its power fading from their bodies, leaving behind only the quiet exhaustion and the haunting questions. The shared nightmare would fade back into the fabric of memory, a story to be whispered by the fire for generations to come. For these people, and for the monk, the knight, the wise woman and the alchemist, their intense inner worlds were always tethered to the greater rhythms of the world outside. After the fire, the fever and the visions, there always comes the quiet. The turning of the seasons, the slow shift from a frantic, haunted autumn into the deep, silent sleep of winter. The shared nightmare would fade back into the fabric of memory. For these people, and for the monk, the knight, the wise woman and the alchemist, their intense inner worlds were always tethered to the greater rhythms of the world outside. After the fire, the fever and the visions, there always comes the quiet. The turning of the seasons, the slow shift from a frantic, haunted autumn into the deep, silent sleep of winter. Let's pause here in that quiet. Let us leave the specific minds of our characters and simply rest for a moment in the world they all shared. The autumn air is growing thin and sharp, carrying the first real promise of frost. The quality of the light has changed. The sun is lower in the sky, its light less a declaration and more a soft golden memory, casting long, mournful shadows across the land. The riot of summer green has surrendered, replaced by the gentler, more thoughtful colours of rust and ochre and pale, brittle gold. The world is growing quiet. The frantic buzz of summer insects has ceased. The birdsong has thinned out, leaving only the hardy chatter of a few remaining residents. The prevailing sound now is the sigh of the wind through the bare branches and the dry, whispering rustle of leaves skittering across the cold ground. And there is a smell. It is the sweet, earthy perfume of decay, of life breaking down to begin again. But woven through it is the most comforting scent of all wood smoke. From the chimney of the monastery, the castle, the cottage and the alchemist's townhouse, thin grey plumes of smoke rise into the pale sky, a signal that life is drawing inward, gathering around the hearth, preparing for the long dark. This is a time of final harvests. In his garden, Brother Anselm is no longer gathering flowers but digging for roots. He pulls gnarled mandrake and pale valerian from the cold earth, their power now concentrated deep underground, sleeping until the spring. In her cottage, Alara has barred the door against the wind. The herbs hanging from her rafters are brittle and dry to the touch, their life force now a fragile sleeping scent that fills her small home. On the high battlements of his lord's castle, Sir Cailan stands alone, his cloak whipped by the wind. The noisy campaigns of summer are over. He stares out at the grey sleeping fields, and the profound quiet of the landscape offers him no escape, only a cold mirror for the silence in his own soul. Even for Master Valerius in his sealed-off world, the season makes itself known. The light from his high window is weaker, forcing him to work ever closer to the glow of his furnace, its fire becoming his only sun. And in the village of Oakhaven, the first snow begins to fall, each delicate flake a moment of grace, a soft, clean blanket coming to cover the memory of the feverish autumn. Winter is a time for sleep, for stories told by the fire, for the world to hold its breath. But winter does not last forever. Spring always comes, and with the light comes the reckoning. We must now return to our friends to see what the morning brought after their long, strange nights. Winter is a time for sleep, for stories told by the fire, for the world to hold its breath. But winter does not last forever. Spring always comes, and with the light comes the reckoning. We must now return to our friends to see what the morning brought after their long, strange nights. Our journey takes us back to the infirmary, but it is a different place now. The flickering, desperate candlelight of the night has been replaced by the cool, clean light of dawn. A single high window, previously a square of impenetrable black, is now a soft grey canvas promising the arrival of a new day. The air once thick with the metallic scent of pain now smells only of clean linen, dried herbs and the faint, pleasant aroma of melting beeswax. The monastery is awake, its life humming to the gentle rhythm of morning prayers, the sound a comforting, steady drone in the background. On the straw pallet, Thomas the stonemason begins to stir. His return to the world is not a sudden jolt, but a slow, gentle swim up from a deep, dark and dreamless sea. The first thing he perceives is the sound of the chanting, a sound he has heard every day of his life from his own cottage in the village, but which now sounds like the most peaceful music ever composed. The next is a feeling of profound weight. His limbs feel heavy as if made of lead, but it is a pleasant anchoring heaviness, not the brittle tension of agony. He lies still for a long time, simply existing, taking inventory. He can feel the rough texture of the wool blanket against his chin. He can feel the cool air on his face. He wiggles the fingers of his right hand, then his left. He curls the toes of his good foot, and then bracing himself, he sends his awareness on a cautious journey down his shattered leg. He listens for the blacksmith. He waits for the shriek of the hammer, the searing fire of the forge. But the blacksmith is gone. The forge is cold. The relentless screaming noise that had been his entire world has vanished. In its place is a dull, distant throb. It is a pain, yes, but it is an honest pain. It is the simple physical complaint of a broken bone, not the soul-destroying torment of a nerve set on fire. It is a pain he can understand, a pain he can live with. It is the difference between a house fire and the warm glow of a hearth. He has been given back a piece of his own mind. A soft rustle of cloth makes him open his eyes. Brother Anselm is there sitting in a simple wooden chair beside the pallet, a book resting unread in his lap. He had been dozing, and Thomas's stirring has woken him. The old monk's face in the gentle morning light is filled with a quiet, weary compassion. "Brother Anselm," Thomas whispers, his voice a dry, unused croak. "Peace, my son," Anselm says softly, leaning forward. The night is over. He helps Thomas take a small sip of cool water from a clay cup. The water is the most wonderful thing Thomas has ever tasted. "How long?" Thomas asks. "A full night and a day. You slept well?" The monk says, a faint, kind smile touching his lips. He places a cool hand on Thomas's forehead, checking for fever. Thomas lacks the words for what he feels. Gratitude is too small a term. How do you thank a man for silencing a demon? How do you explain the peace of a quiet mind to someone who has never lost it? He settles for the simplest truth. The hammering stopped, brother," he says, his voice thick with emotion. "The fire is out." Brother Anselm simply nods his eyes, understanding everything. "God is merciful," he says, deflecting the thanks as he always does. "Now you must rest. Rest is the best medicine now. Rest will let the bone knit." As Anselm busies himself changing the dressing on a smaller cut, Thomas lies back, his head sinking into the straw. He looks around the infirmary at the hanging herbs, at the steady light in the window. He feels a profound sense of awe. He is a practical man, a man of stone and hammers and chisels. He understands the physical world, but what happened to him was beyond his understanding. A bitter drink, a few whispered words, and a night of black, dreamless peace had done what all his own strength and willpower could not. He had been given a gift of silence, a mercy brewed from a flower in the monk's garden. His leg will take many weeks to heal. He will be weak for a long time, but the true crisis has passed. The psychological siege, the relentless torment that breaks a man's spirit far more surely than it breaks his bones is over. Because he can now rest, he can now begin to heal. In the sanctuary of the monastery, a life was eased, and gratitude bloomed like a spring flower. Here the line between medicine and miracle was clear, protected by faith and stone walls. But in the village where there are no walls, that same line is as thin as a spider's thread. For Ilara, the wise woman, the successful healing of one night does not bring peace or gratitude. It brings something far more complicated, a whispered reputation, a currency of fear and awe that could enrich her or destroy her with the next shift in the wind. Of course, here is the seventh fragment, the second resolution piece, focusing on the precarious aftermath for Ilara, the wise woman. It continues directly from Brother Anselm's story. The sound of peaceful monastic chanting has faded, replaced once again by the sound of a lone, crackling hearth fire and the whistling of the wind outside a small cottage. Host. In the sanctuary of the monastery, a life was eased and gratitude bloomed like a spring flower. Here the line between medicine and miracle was clear, protected by faith and stone walls. But in the village where there are no walls, that same line is as thin as a spider's thread. For Ilara, the wise woman, the successful healing of one night does not bring peace or gratitude. It brings something far more complicated, a whispered reputation, a currency of fear and awe that could enrich her or destroy her with the next shift in the wind. A few days have passed since Isla, the frantic young mother, came to Ilara's door. Inside the small, smoky cottage, life has returned to its normal, quiet rhythm. Ilara sits on a low stool by the fire, mending a tear in her woolen cloak, her hands moving with the slow, steady competence of a lifetime of self-reliance. The air is warm, filled with the smell of the herbs that hang from the rafters, like sleeping bats, their power dormant for now. It is a scene of simple, solitary peace. A soft knock at the door breaks the quiet. It is Ela, and her face is transformed. The desperate, haunted look is gone, replaced by a radiant, restful smile. The baby nestled in her arms is not wailing, but sleeping its tiny chest, rising and falling in a soft, even rhythm. Ilara Isla whispers, her voice brimming with a gratitude so pure it's almost painful to witness. He sleeps through the night. He even smiles now. I don't know how to thank you. She pushes a small cloth-wrapped bundle into Ilara's hands. It contains a wedge of hard cheese and a small honeycomb, a fortune for a family like hers. But Isla is not alone. Standing behind her, shifting nervously from foot to foot, is another woman from the village, her cousin holding a fretful, whimpering toddler. And in this moment, Ilara's brief sense of satisfaction curdles into a familiar cold dread. "This is my cousin Mare," Isla says. "Her little Reese has a terrible cough and he cries all night. I told her you could help, that you have a potion. That word, potion. It's a word that tastes of smoke and moonlight and things done in secret. It is not the word for medicine, it is the word for magic." Ilara invites them in her face, a calm, unreadable mask. She looks at the little boy Reese. His chest rattles with each breath, his nose is running, and his eyes are glassy. It is a common chest cold, nothing more. It is not the deep internal torment that had afflicted Ela's baby. She turns to Mare. "A potion is not needed here," she says, her voice quiet but firm. "The trouble is in his chest, not his belly. A tea of thyme and horehound with a little honey to soothe his throat will quiet the cough and let him rest." She moves to her drying herbs, gathering the simple common plants. But Mare's face falls. There is a flash of disappointment in her eyes, quickly followed by suspicion. "A tea?" she asks, her voice laced with doubt. "Isla said you had something stronger. A sleeping draught." She looks around the cottage, her eyes scanning the dark corners as if trying to spot the cauldron, the book of shadows, the tools of a sorceress. She believes she is being denied the real medicine. Ilara simply prepares the herbs and gives Mare clear instructions, accepting a small wooden coin for her trouble. But as the two women leave, Ela's grateful smile is now mixed with a hint of confusion, and Mare's face is a mask of discontent. The door closes and Ilara is alone again, but the peace of the cottage has been broken. She sinks back onto her stool, staring into the fire. Her mother's words come back to her, a whisper from the grave. "They will love you for your cures, and they will burn you for the same. Never let them think it is easy. Never let them see the true power." She had failed. In her pity for Isla, she had used one of her most dangerous allies, the stinking nightshade, the henbane, and it had worked too well. The story that was now spreading through the village was not of a wise woman who knew how to balance a powerful herb with a gentle one. The story was of a woman who possessed a magical potion that could command sleep. And a woman who could command sleep could surely command a deeper sleep. A permanent one. Later that day, she walks to the edge of the woods to gather fallen branches for her fire. As she stoops to pick up a piece of dry oak, she sees a group of children playing near the creek. They see her and their laughter dies. They fall silent, huddling together, watching her. One of them, a small boy, makes the sign of horns with his fingers, a ward against the evil eye, before his mother rushes out of a nearby cottage and shuffles them all inside. Elara stands there, a bundle of wood in her arms, her heart a cold stone in her chest. It has begun. The whispers, the fear. Yesterday she was a healer. Today she's a source of rumour. Tomorrow she could be a threat. She looks at the bunch of dried henbane hanging in the darkest corner of her cottage. It is no longer a tool of mercy. It is evidence, a liability. The very thing that had earned her a mother's tearful thanks might now earn her a visit from the priest, his face not seeking a cure, but demanding a confession. For Elara, the price of a quiet night for another was a new anxiety for herself, a fear born of whispers and suspicion. Her cure was a gamble that had paid off for now. But what of a cure that offers no peace at all? For the night Sir Caelan, the morning after his own remedy, brings no gratitude and no fear of others, only the cold, clear and agonizing return of himself. For Elara, the price of a quiet night for another was a new anxiety for herself, a fear born of whispers and suspicion. Her cure was a gamble that had paid off for now. But what of a cure that offers no peace at all? For the night Sir Caelan, the morning after his own remedy, brings no gratitude and no fear of others, only the cold, clear and agonizing return of himself. The first thing that breaks through the sludge of Caelan's sleep is the light. It is not the gentle grey dawn of the infirmary. It is a single sharp sliver of unforgiving morning light cutting through the arrow-slit window of his small cell-like chamber. It slices across his face like a razor, and his eyes clench shut against it. The second thing is the sound. Not the distant, peaceful chant of monks, but the hammering of a blacksmith. But this blacksmith isn't in a forge. He's set up shop inside Caelan's skull, and he is methodically, rhythmically trying to beat his way out. Caelan groans a low animal sound of pure misery. He rolls onto his back, and the movement sends a nauseous wave through his stomach. His mouth is a desert, a floor paved with sand and old wool. He tries to swallow, but there is nothing to swallow. He is profoundly, miserably thirsty. His entire body aches not with the honest pain of a wound, but with the dull, poisoned protest of muscles that have been steeped in cheap mead and powerful herbs. He feels unclean. This is the physical price. But as he lies there in the cold morning air, a far worse payment comes due. Last night, the honeyed mead had created a thick protective fog in his mind, a buffer between him and the ghosts of his memory. Now the fog has lifted, and the ghosts which had been held at bay come rushing back in not as hazy spectres, but with a terrible crystalline clarity. He sees the face of a boy no older than his squire from the last battle, the look of shocked surprise in his eyes as Caelan's sword went in. He can hear, as if it were happening right now, the high, terrified screaming of a horse with a broken leg. He can smell the cloying, coppery scent of blood mixed with the mud and the rain. These memories are more vivid, more cruel, more accusatory than they were before. His attempt to drown them has only made them stronger, and with the ghosts comes a feeling he despises more than any enemy on the battlefield: shame. A deep, hollowing self-loathing. He, Sir Caelan, a knight sworn to discipline and strength, lies here like a common drunk defeated by a horn of honey wine. He has shown a cowardice of the soul, a weakness that feels far more damning than any physical retreat. The great hall, the laughter, the backslapping camaraderie, it all feels like a hollow mockery now. He wasn't celebrating a victory. He was trying to flee from himself. A soft knock at the door makes him flinch. A young boy, his squire, enters carrying a steaming bucket of water and Caelan's tunic for the day. The boy, whose name is Peter, tries to be professional. He doesn't comment on the stale, sour smell in the room, or the knight's obviously wretched state. But Caelan sees the look in his eyes, a mixture of pity and a faint youthful disgust. It is the look of a boy witnessing his hero revealed as a broken, fallible man. "Your water, my lord," the boy says, his voice carefully neutral. Caelan pushes himself up, his head swimming with the movement. He says nothing, just grunts as he splashes the cold water on his face, the shock of it, doing little to quell the hammering in his skull. He drinks greedily from the bucket, the water tasting of metal and stone, but it is life itself. As the boy helps him into his tunic and fastens the heavy leather belt around his waist, Kalen feels like an imposter. The weight of the empty scabbard at his hip, the familiar feel of the worn leather, it all belongs to a different man, a stronger man. He has to put on the armor of his duty now, but the man inside the armor is crumbling. Dressed, he stands and walks to the narrow window, looking down into the castle courtyard. The world is waking up. Grooms are leading horses to the trough the castle cook is shouting at a kitchen. Hand life is moving on with its usual indifferent rhythm, but Kalen is stuck. He is trapped here in the cold stone room of his own mind with the ghosts and the blacksmith for company. His remedy, his flight into oblivion, has healed nothing. It has solved nothing. It was simply a postponement of this exact moment, this miserable, sober dawn. He has borrowed a few hours of numbness from the future, and the future is now demanding repayment with interest. For the night, the morning brought only the bitter certainty that no amount of mead could drown his ghosts. His remedy was a failed bargain, a flight from a past that could not be outrun. But what if a remedy meant not to erase the past, but to unlock the future? In his city workshop, Master Valerius the alchemist also wakes to a new day. He does not feel regret but triumph. He is surrounded not by ghosts but by pages of what he believes are divine secrets, unaware that his own great work is slowly, meticulously unwriting itself. For the night, the morning brought only the bitter certainty that no amount of mead could drown his ghosts. His remedy was a failed bargain, a flight from a past that could not be outrun. But what if a remedy meant not to erase the past but to unlock the future? In his city workshop, Master Valerius the alchemist also wakes to a new day, or rather he greets a new day, for he has not slept at all. He is still at his desk, hunched over his journal, the candle beside him now a sad, melted stump swimming in a pool of its own wax. The grey morning light that filters through the grimy high window seems an unwelcome intrusion into the sacred space of his nightly work. He's electric, his mind buzzing with the echoes of the visions he received. He feels a triumphant, ecstatic exhaustion. He has done it. He has communed with the very spirit of matter, and it has whispered its secrets to him. The proof is right here on the pages before him. They are a frantic, chaotic mess of symbols and diagrams of spidery Latin, mixed with Greek and cryptic signs known only to the initiated. He rereads a passage he wrote in the deepest hour of the night, his own words thrilling him. The red dragon has devoured the white eagle, and in their union the serpent eats its own tail. The volatile is fixed, the spirit is given a body, the body a spirit. The work is sealed, viatoriol. To an outsider it is the ravings of a madman. To Valerius it is a perfect poetic summation of a divine truth he has just uncovered. He decides to draw the most sacred of all symbols, the perfect circle, representing the unity of all things, the shape of God himself. He picks up his quill, dips it in the ink, and with a flourish he attempts to draw it. But his hand shakes. The tremor which last night felt like a cosmic vibration is now a frustrating, undeniable palsy. The resulting shape on the page is not a circle, but a wobbly, broken oval. He scowls, annoyed. It is as if his own clumsy mortal flesh is refusing to keep pace with his newly enlightened mind. He puts down the quill and rubs his temples. The metallic taste in his mouth is stronger than ever a permanent resident on his tongue. A good sign, he tells himself. It means the essence of Mercury, the spirit of thought and fluidity, has truly infused his being. He's becoming one with his work. But then, an even more unwelcome intrusion. He runs his tongue over his teeth, a nervous habit, and feels one of them, a molar in the back, give a distinct unnerving wiggle. A cold knot of fear tightens in his stomach. This is not a vibration. This is not a divine kiss. This is decay. This is the stuff of common frail mortality, something he's supposed to be transcending. For a moment the grand edifice of his delusion threatens to crack. But he is a master architect of his own reality. He quickly finds the reason. Of course, the great work requires a breakdown before the build-up. The old corruptible mortal body must be dismantled, its weaknesses purged to make way for the new incorruptible philosophical body. A loose tooth is not a sign of poison. It is a sign of renewal. Reassured, he gets up and goes to the Athenori's furnace. It is time to examine the physical product of his great spiritual breakthrough. With protective leather gloves, he unseals the furnace door and carefully removes the glass retort. It has cooled now. He holds it up to the light. Inside is a pathetic, undeniable failure. There is no new substance, no shimmering elixir, no nascent philosopher's stone. The beautiful blood-red cinnabar has been reduced to a blackened, cracked, ugly slag at the bottom of the flask. The silvery spirit of mercury he so lovingly released has condensed on the neck of the retort not as a bright, pure metal, but as a dirty, tarnished puddle contaminated with sulphurous residue. The experiment on a purely chemical level has ruined a perfectly good piece of cinnabar. For any other man, this would be a moment of crushing defeat. But Valerius has an explanation for everything. His face, which had been clouded with doubt, now lights up with a new, even more profound understanding. He has not failed. He lets out a soft, breathy laugh. He has succeeded more perfectly than he could have imagined. This blackened, dead, worthless-looking substance. This is the nigrido, the blackening, the first and most crucial stage of the great work, the phase of decomposition of putrefaction of the black crow and the dark sun. He hasn't failed to create gold. He has successfully created the primal chaos, the blank slate from which all things can be made new. With renewed feverish energy, he returns to his journal. He does not cross out his previous notes on the triumph of the spirit. He simply adds a new chapter. He carefully, meticulously documents the physical properties of the successful nigrido phase. The tremor in his hand, the taste in his mouth, the black dead slag in the flask, it is all part of the divine pattern. He is not a man slowly poisoning himself in a dusty attic. He is a pioneer charting the darkest, most dangerous and most necessary territory on the map to eternal life. And so the alchemist, with shaking hands and a faltering mind, writes his own magnificent failure into the pages of history as a triumph. His delusion is a fortress built brick by brick to protect him from the simple, terrible truth. He is one man lost in a private labyrinth. But what happens when an entire community must perform the same act of interpretation? For the villagers of Oakhaven waking from their shared nightmare, there is no dusty book to offer answers. They must look to each other and to the heavens to try and make sense of the sacred terror they all endured. And so the alchemist, with shaking hands and a faltering mind, writes his own magnificent failure into the pages of history as a triumph. His delusion is a fortress built brick by brick to protect him from the simple, terrible truth. He is one man lost in a private labyrinth. But what happens when an entire community must perform the same act of interpretation? For the villagers of Oakhaven waking from their shared nightmare, there is no dusty book to offer answers. They must look to each other and to the heavens to try and make sense of the sacred terror they all endured. It has been 2 weeks since the last villager stopped dancing, since the last phantom fire in the limbs finally cooled. The holy fire, as they have come to call it, has passed. The village of Oakhaven is awake, but it is a convalescent waking. Life has returned, but its rhythms are slower, more deliberate. The air itself feels different, heavy with a shared unspoken memory. People move about their daily chores, feeding the chickens, mending a fence, drawing water from the well, but their movements are quiet, their conversations are muted. They look at each other with a new, strange understanding. They are all survivors of the same shipwreck, now washed ashore on the familiar yet irrevocably altered coast of their own lives. The world has become thin. The veil between what is real and what is not, once a thick, sturdy curtain, is now a tattered, transparent gauze. The villagers avoid looking directly at the gnarled oak tree at the edge of the woods, where several people saw a horned man laughing. The children no longer play by the creek where the women saw the winged beast. Every landmark is now imbued with a second secret history. This cannot last. The human mind and the community it forms cannot exist in a state of pure, unexplained mystery. It needs a story. It needs a meaning. And so, on a cool, clear morning, a small informal council gathers in the churchyard. There is Father Michael, the village priest, his face still pale from the ordeal. There is John the Reeve, the practical man who represents the absent lord of the manor. And there is old Giles, a farmer whose grandfather's grandfather had worked this same land his mind, a storehouse of pre-Christian lore. They sit on the low stone wall, their task to weave a story that can hold the village together. It was a test, Father Michael begins, his voice firm, eager to build a theological container for the chaos. God sent a trial to Oakhaven as he did to Job to test the strength of our faith. We were afflicted, we suffered, but we prayed, and he has delivered us. We must offer up our thanks. Old Giles, his face a leather map of wrinkles, spits thoughtfully onto the ground. It was the land. He rasps, his voice like stones grinding together. The harvest was too wet. The ground was sour. When the earth is unhappy, the gentry wake up. He uses the old fearful name for the fairies, the spirits of the land. They soured the bread. They put dancing in our feet and nightmares in our heads. It wasn't God. It was them. John the Reeve, a man who thinks in terms of bushels and taxes, shifts uncomfortably. He has little time for heavenly tests or for the fairy folk. The grain was bad, he says flatly. There was a blight on it. A mould. I've seen it before on a smaller scale. It makes the cattle sick. This time it made us sick. His explanation is simple, rational, and entirely unsatisfying. It offers no meaning, no lesson, no comfort. It suggests the universe is not a place of divine order or mystical rules, but simply a place where bread can inexplicably go bad and drive a whole village mad. It is the most terrifying explanation of all, and so it is the one they will all silently agree to ignore. A consensus begins to form a hybrid of faith and folklore. Father Michael's version will be the official story. It was a divine trial. The visions of the Holy Mother, the feeling of grace that some felt amidst the terror, those were real signs of God's presence. The visions of demons and beasts. Those were tricks of the devil allowed by God to tempt the weak of faith during the trial. Old Giles's warnings about respecting the land are folded in, transformed into a call for greater piety and humility before God's creation. The story is forged. Oakhaven was not poisoned by a fungus. Oakhaven was chosen. They were brought to the very gates of hell, and they held fast to their faith, and they were saved. They will hold a special mass of thanksgiving. They will whitewash the church walls as if to physically paint over the memory of the crawling patterns. They will mend the bell rope which snapped during the frantic demonic ringing. They will restore order. And so the village weaves its shared trauma into a sacred story, a shield of meaning against a terrifyingly random world. They find their comfort in a collective explanation. The monk found his in purpose, the wise woman in her inherited knowledge, the knight in oblivion, the alchemist in delusion. 5 different souls, 5 different paths, all born from the same timeless human desires to escape our pain, to quiet our minds, and to bargain with the great silent mysteries of existence. And so the village weaves its shared trauma into a sacred story, a shield of meaning against a terrifyingly random world. They find their comfort in a collective explanation. The monk found his in purpose, the wise woman in her inherited knowledge, the knight in oblivion, the alchemist in delusion. 5 different souls, 5 different paths, all born from the same timeless human desires to escape our pain, to quiet our minds, and to bargain with the great silent mysteries of existence. Let's pull back now one last time. Let's drift high above the monastery, the cottage, the castle, the city, and the village. From this quiet distance, their individual struggles begin to blend into a single human story. Consider the men who sought silence. Thomas the mason, his body screaming from a clean, honest wound, and Sir Caelan the knight, his soul screaming from 100 ragged internal ones. One was given the gift of a deep healing sleep in a quiet infirmary. The other chased a noisy, bruising oblivion in a roaring hall. But both craved the same thing, an end to the noise, a mercy whether it came as a gentle hand or a heavy hammer that could finally make the screaming stop. Consider the women who managed life's fragile edge. Brother Anselm in his sanctioned garden, and Alara in her wilder one. One was a librarian of medicine protected by the authority of God and Latin texts. The other was a practitioner of it, protected only by her own results and reputation. But both understood the secret language of the earth. Both knew that the power to heal and the power to harm grew on the same stem, that the difference between a remedy that brought sleep and a poison that brought the final sleep was sometimes just a matter of a single fateful drop. They were the caretakers of the threshold. And consider those who are desperate for an explanation. The alchemist Valerius in his solitary quest, believing he could decode the mind of God by boiling stones and reading the whispers in toxic fumes. And the entire village of Oakhaven huddled together after their shared fever dream, needing to weave a collective story that could tame the terrifying randomness of their experience. One sought his answers in a secret personal language of symbols, the other in the public shared language of faith. But both were driven by the same desperate need to impose a human order on an indifferent and chaotic universe. In the end, the poppy, the henbane, the mead, the mercury, and the fungus, they were never the real story. They were just the tools at hand, the strange and powerful keys that were available in that time and place. The true story, the one that never changes, is the restlessness of the human heart and its eternal, unending search for a little peace. And what about us here in our own time, centuries later, lying in the quiet of our own rooms? We have our own potions, our own drafts. They come in foil blister packs and bottles with caps we can barely open. Our doses are measured in precise milligrams, their effects charted on peer-reviewed graphs. We have replaced the doctrine of signatures with the double-blind study. We have traded the alchemist's athanor for the chemist's beaker. We have for the most part swapped mystery for certainty, a change for which we are and should be deeply grateful. And yet, the timeless desires remain. We still feel the sharp edges of a world that is too much with us. We still carry our own ghosts, our own pains. We still lie awake in the deep hours of the night, our thoughts racing like panicked horses, wishing for a quiet field to release them into. We still seek a silencing of the noise, and we still surrender every single night to the oldest mystery of them all, the strange alchemical process of sleep where our own consciousness dissolves and our logical minds give way to the surreal, nonsensical, and sometimes profound theatre of dreams. The journey of our 5 friends is over. Brother Anselm's patient is healed. Ilara's reputation is a new and dangerous burden. Sir Kaelin's ghosts still wait for him. The alchemist continues his magnificent slow decay. And the village of Oakhaven sleeps under the protection of a new and sacred story. Their long night has ended, and now so can ours. The sounds from their world have faded. The echoes of their struggles have served their purpose to carry us gently to this quiet moment. Here in the safety of your bed there is no need for a monk's potion or a knight's mead. There are no visions to interpret, no ghosts to flee. There is only the darkness, the quiet, and the gentle pull of your own well-earned rest. Let the stories dissolve. Let the characters fade. Let the quiet that remains behind the story fill the room. It is time to sleep. Sleep now.